one of the most underused techniques in all of yoga and one of the most effective. In Sanskrit, it's called bandhana, and in English, it's called prayer. I say this, so if you've been in my class, you might not know it. How many people knew that prayer, real prayer, is actual yogic practice? Adele, why is prayer a yogic practice?
I've read that it's part of yoga, just like the asanas. And so you have the asanas, which is poses to make you fit for meditation. And you have prayer, which would be like a lead-in to, well, then you have like pranayama, which is controlling that, and you have some relaxation, and then some prayer to maybe connect with the divine. Then you go into meditation, ascension, different parts of yoga.
Okay. So, sorry, me. So yeah, prayer, what you're talking about is, it's a classical part of one path of yoga. So I'm going to write all that on the board. So basically, there are 4 main paths of yoga. I'm going to write them. Prayer is actually, I'm actually not going to write all 4 of them. I'm going to write this. Prayer is one of them. So, prayer is, technically speaking, I think what Abdel said, is a genuine yogic practice as handed down by the actual teachers and inventors of yoga in the formal systems of yoga. And a lot of people wouldn't have maybe known that. So that's good. So it's a formal part of prayer. And in practical ways, why is prayer a yogic practice? These are almost trick questions because you might have had to study this type of thing to know them. So I'm not expecting, everyone to know them. I'm just actually getting ideas out there. So don't be afraid of saying something incorrect.
I was just going to say maybe because it gets your mind to do a single focus.
You know what? Actually, that's good. I like that. And I hadn't thought about that. So why is getting your mind to a single focus yogic?
To accept the distractions, concentrate, it's meditative.
Perfect.
Internal, makes you look inside.
Okay, cool. Okay, well let's start with the definition of yoga, because you're 100% right. Some people have come to my classes before, so who can give me a definition of yoga?
Union of souls, or the body with the soul?
No. How about this? I'm going to destroy this one right now. It's a big one, that misconception. Yoga does not mean union of mind, body, and soul.
It's the cessation of the fluctuations in the mind.
Okay, so can we rephrase it as, agree, bringing the mind to absolute stillness? Is that cool? Okay. So do you want to tell everybody where you got that from?
Well, it's Chitta Vijnanadeva. It's one of the, I don't even remember where I got it.
Okay.
It's a blend in my mind.
Okay, so it's from a text called the Raja Yoga Sutras, written by Patanjali around the turn of the millennium. He starts off Yoga Anusasanam, which means now yoga is explained. And then the next verse is Yogas Chitta Riti Nirodha. It's a famous verse if you take a yoga teaching course. Usually you'll learn that verse. It means yoga is bringing to cessation the whirlpools of activity in the mind. So he's saying that yoga actually means bringing the mind to absolute stillness. And then he goes next, he says, then the seer rests in her own true nature. But we'll go further than that, right? Because the term yoga, who's heard it, means union, right? Okay. So it comes from the Sanskrit word yuj, which means to yoke together, to join. Yoke is for those who don't, whose English isn't their first language, when you have two bulls who are plowing a farm field, the yoke is the thing that holds those bulls together, the big wooden thing they put around their neck. It joins the bulls together. So what is uniting with what, though? So that's why I put up here through. And this is why it's actually good to read various scriptures, because the scriptures are consistent, but they'll give you a better overall picture of it. So yoga is bringing the mind to absolute stillness, and also yoga does mean union. So what union is it referring to?
Mind, body, and soul with the divine.
Right, so we're going to skip mind and body action.
Okay, yeah, soul and divine.
Right, so it's the soul and the divine. This is why this is super important, because you know what? It's not that uniting with mind and body is a negative thing. It's a positive thing. But yoga actually means transcending mind and body. And what happens in the West is, how many people agree that the West tends to appropriate things from other cultures, right? and then twist them and doesn't convey them accurately. Anyone aware that the West is doing this correctly? So it's done this with yoga. The great danger in it doing that is that real yoga is lost. The West also, how many people agree, takes things and it materializes things. It's very materialistic, right? Very physically oriented. So they're taking a spiritual practice, yoga. And how about this? There's no spiritual side to yoga. I love to say this. There's no spiritual side to yoga. If it's not spiritual, it's not yoga. Because, quite frankly, yoga refers to the union of the soul with the pure divine, or however you want to pray it. Actually, I'm going to maybe get more controversial. Refers to the union of the soul with God through bringing the mind to absolute stillness. That's the actual definition of yoga. That's the scriptural definition of yoga. The people who invented yoga, that's what they said yoga is, and they gave many practices for it. The reason it's not union of the mind and body is because the bodies are coverings on the soul that we're actually trying to transcend. Does that make sense? Now, having said that, along the way, you can unite the mind and body with the soul in order to bring it under control. So that means you can join with the mind and body, but strictly for the purposes of controlling it and then putting it down. And then using it at will. So you can use the mind and body at will in your service to the divine. But the goal isn't to simply unite with the mind and body, especially not without having dominance over it. Because the mind and body, quite frankly, the natural tendencies of the mind and body actually says this, and it's super clear about this in yoga scriptures, are to lead you away from God. And when I'm talking about God, I'm talking about source, pure spirit, pure divinity. Right? Everything is God, because everything is source, everything is spirit. So when I'm talking about this, I'm talking about the supreme, I'm talking about pure spirit, which is beyond the material. And so the tendency of the mind is to lead you away from that. In fact, in the scriptures it's super clear. It says that the mind is your enemy. And he says you strive for yoga, which is to bring the mind under control so that you can transcend it. You want to bring the mind to stillness, and then, as Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, the self within is already reached. And so that's the definition of yoga. Yoga is bringing the mind to absolute cessation of activity. And in this state, once the mind is stopped, the individual soul is already merged in its own true nature, and its true nature is God. So I'm going to read some verses from Scripture so that everyone is convinced of that. But so moving into today's topic, there are actually 4 main paths of yoga. One of them is called Ashtanga Yoga, also called Raja Yoga. It's 8 limbs of bodily and mental control. The 8 limbs are, I'm not going to go over them all because this isn't our topic today. You can look online though. If you want, I have a website. We actually did, Mimi was here and she brought her students for that, the Foundations of Yoga class, in which we talked about, there's the 8 limbs of Ashtanga Yoga. We also talk about the paths of Ashtanga Yoga. So if you want more information on those, you can go online. We actually did a whole class on all the paths that I'm going to mention. Today we're going to focus on prayer, which is one part of the paths. But the 8 limbs are yamas, niyamas, which are the moral and spiritual codes of conduct that yogis follow. The third one are asanas, which are physical postures. Note the yogis put spiritual and moral conduct before asanas as a foundation. Traditionally, you wouldn't even begin asana practice until you understood that the goal of it was spiritual, and that spiritual and moral conduct was necessary to have success in it. The fourth step is called pranayama, which are techniques to bring the life energy under control through controlling the breath. The fifth step is called now. So those are all preparatory in order to focus the soul toward the goal and to bring the body's energies under control. Does that make sense? Then you're going to lead into how you attain this merger. Step 5 is pratyahara, which means withdrawing your consciousness from external and internal phenomena. So pratyahara means taking your consciousness out of where you don't want it. That leads to dharana. 6th step is focusing it where you do. Which means in yoga, you're always focused on the divine. That's another thing. It's good to remember. If the focus isn't on the divine, it's not yoga. Because this is what yoga is. So it'd be interesting and actually beneficial to start seeing everything through the lens of, and here's what I'm saying, the things I'm telling you, they're not opinions. They're not, these are things that have been established for thousands of years. And what I'm saying is that the West has appropriated yoga culture and largely either not taught this or mistaught it. And that's to our detriment, because I say this, yoga is the way home. Yoga is the way back to your true self, and quite frankly, in terms of psychological tools, there's none better for achieving happiness. Because nothing teaches you how to control your mind so much as yoga. The yogis worked this out thousands of years. In terms of the nature of the mind and how to bring it under control, yoga's got it down better than anyone. And the mind is really our source of unhappiness. All things that are happening, they have one avenue into the consciousness, the mind. Does that make sense? And what is consciousness? I've said it a lot. The soul is consciousness. That's the definition. And God is consciousness. The mind is not consciousness. The mind is an energetic body covering the soul, which stores recollections of the soul's journey and recycles judgments about those experiences over and over in this consciousness. So it's a tool for processing consciousness, which generally works more against us than for us. You are the soul, you're pure consciousness. So I'm going to keep moving. So what we're trying to do is control our soul, which is our awareness and our energy, consciousness and energy. And so with the Ashtanga yoga system, we act morally, we bring the body, asanas are meant to bring the body's energies under control so that we can advance to the higher stages. Then we bring energies further under control through breathing exercises, withdrawing our consciousness from external and internal phenomena, thoughts and feelings and desires, right? We're all the time we're thinking about, most of our day is consumed with recycled feelings, thoughts, and desires. How many people would agree with that? Right? That's what's going on. Yoga is bringing your consciousness out of that, and that's called pratyahara. Dharana is focusing it on the divine, usually internally. Then, once that focus is unbroken, you reach dhyana, which is meditation. So, most of us, including myself, rarely meditate. Because meditation only occurs, in the Raja Yoga Sutras, defines meditation. It says it's unbroken flow of consciousness in one direction. Meaning unbroken flow of attention and energy toward one thing. Meaning if you have a thought while you're meditating, then that's not yet full meditation, or the meditation is broken. Right? So usually in meditation, and that's okay, don't panic. Usually in what we call meditation, what we're actually doing is we're actually practicing pratyahara, which is withdrawing our consciousness from our thoughts and feelings, and dharana, focusing on our breath or whatever other thing that leads to the divine. And that's the constant process. So in meditation, when you are desiring to advance, some people say, oh, I can't still my mind, it's not working. Your mind is not going to still. The real practice is in constantly withdrawing it and refocusing it. Once you get good at that, then the mind will learn to settle down, and then you'll enter into this, we call it the mindless state, the thoughtless state. In fact, there's a Buddhist book I have called The Warrior Song of King Gesar. It's a beautiful quote. He says, resolve the demonic torments. What do you say? What do you say? Resolve the demonic torment of the mind, something like this. I'm butchering it, but it goes something like, resolve the demonic torments of the mind in the fearless heart space of non-thought, and you will find peace in the natural state. And that's what Bhagavad Gita says. Once the mind is stilled, the self within is already reached. Then you attain peace, and then you attain happiness. So that's what we're trying to do. And then once the mind is stilled for long and focused on the divine, without even thought or feeling interrupting it at all, then you enter into what's called samadhi, which is union. The other paths are karma yoga. Karma yoga means devoting all of your actions to the divine. The term karma actually means action and also reaction. So when we speak of karma, we're talking about the stored reactions to all of our past actions. That's what karma is. The way you transcend karma, it says that's how human beings are bound here, by the law of cause and effect. The divine is not bound by that law. So the way we break out of it is we devote all of our actions and the fruits of our actions to the divine. Meaning we work and we give up all the results of the work to God. In fact, Krishna goes so far as to say, those who want to enjoy the fruits of their work are misers. For whom English is in the second language, a miser is someone who's, the word is like a penny pincher, someone who's always trying to spend the very least that they can, and always trying to give the least that they can. He says, if you want to enjoy the fruits of your own work, you're a miser. He says, the intelligent give it up to the divine. He actually says this, he says, so Krishna's speaking as God. In the yoga system, he's God. In the scriptures of yoga, he's God. He says, give to me that thing that you love the most. Such an offering qualifies you for eternal life. So it's a whole radical shift in consciousness from how we're raised in the West. I remember when I first read these, and I first read like the first 2 chapters of Bhagavad Gita, I was like, that is radical. We're taught, work hard, enjoy the fruits of your labor. He said, work hard for me and give me the fruits. And that way you'll be free. Because he says also, the problem with always trying to fulfill your desires is there's always another desire to fulfill. You'll never be satisfied. And you'll never get all your desires fulfilled. When you get them fulfilled, they won't be what you thought they were. You'll get them fulfilled, and then you'll lose the fulfillment. So there's no way to be permanently happy trying to always enjoy the fruits of your work. You have to transcend that process altogether through karma yoga. Another one is called Gyan Yoga. Gyan is using wisdom. So Gyan means wisdom. So with using wisdom to unite with the divine. And one of the main things on the path of Gyan Yoga. So we've actually gone over this in other classes. Like I said, it's on our website and on YouTube. Gyan Yoga, there's 9 passive processes of that. Ashtanga Yoga, there's 8 limbs. In fact, Gyan Yoga has more like, I would say, it's called Gyan Yoga Adhikar, the path of Gyan Yoga. 3, maybe like 9 things that you do. But it's infinite, and it's all integrated. But one of the main ones is Viveka. Viveka means discrimination. The ability to discern or to understand things as they are, and to separate things that are beneficial from things that are not beneficial to your goal. So a yogi says, gambling in Vegas every weekend is not conducive, usually, to my goal of uniting with God and absolutely controlling my mind. So a yogi won't do that, right? However, there's this really great quote I forgot to say. He says, spirituality, unlike religion, is not about do's or don'ts. It's about growth. So a yogi will look and see, is this actually beneficial? Not based on what somebody else says or what's written in a book. They'll use their intelligence and they'll say, this is actually beneficial or this is not. And if they don't know, they're going to stick to the path of safety. They're not going to trust it. They're going to find out. But things may be beneficial today and they may not be beneficial tomorrow. Things may be beneficial for me, but they may not be beneficial for Sada. So it's a very individual thing, and it's based on time, place, and circumstance. That's why you need wisdom, right? So I don't want to lock us in thinking that wisdom is rules. It's not. Wisdom is actual discrimination between what should be done and what should not be done, based on all evaluation of all the factors involved. And wisdom is also seeing things accurately, including our own selves. And then, this other path is called Bhakti. And Bhakti means devotion. It's a path of love. In Bhakti Yoga, you unite with God by loving her, by loving it, and by devoting yourself to it. And there's also what we call 9 steps of Bhakti Yoga. The first one is hearing about God, chanting God's names and speaking about God, remembering God, and it'll go on and on, worshiping God, serving God, considering yourself to be a servant of God, which is a higher level, considering yourself to be God's friend, and then total self-surrender to God. And then one that skipped in there is also prayer. Vandanam is prayer. And that's why, remember I started the class with, why is yoga, why is prayer? A high level, if it's your prayer is high level, yogic practice, That's why. So everyone know now? Did I answer that question? It was a long-winded answer to that question. Because yoga means union with God, and when you're praying, hopefully you're doing so because you want to unite with God, not just get something. Does it make sense? Cool. All right. So what I would like to do is we're going to talk more about prayer, but I think it's nice if we actually just sit quietly. Maybe just 10-15 minutes of meditation just to raise the vibration, settle in. And what I'd like to do as we do this one is let's do a prayerful meditation. Amma the Hugging Saint, she said, we speak to God in prayer, God speaks to us in meditation. So meditation is stilling the mind. In prayer is consciously trying to communicate with the divine. Right? And so when people are like, oh, she doesn't answer back, she does, we need to develop the ability to hear it. And the mind is an interfering agent. That's why we need to still it. And I like to mix them. I do prayerful meditation, which if you ever come to my higher self meditation, there's times where I'll say, call out from your heart to the divine. And be still and receive the answer. So let's see if we can just do a little bit of that. How would that be? And then what we'll do is we'll come back. What to do is I'd like to just go around briefly because I'd like to get everyone talking, see who we're here. I'm going to ask you to say your name, where you're from, what brought you to class today, and how you are using prayer in your life. And we'll start here to my hot tea right there.
My name is Valerie. I'm from Germany. I have Ukrainian heritage, and I don't use the prayer in my life.
Okay. Hopefully after today that's going to change. Alright, thank you, Valerie.
Now, from Los Angeles, I'm here for a few weeks, so I try to come on Mondays and Fridays. I think this is good to create community. Prayer, I try to pray as much as I can. I see it as a way of trying to keep my consciousness, trying to keep like where you get to in meditation, to try to keep it. If you pray, it helps go back, try to get some of that and try to stay in that state a little bit.
Who do you pray to?
Divine or God.
Okay. Any particular form of the divine or God?
No, the infinite divine. Like,
Fair enough. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Inti. I'm from Morocco. My spiritual journey, I would say, I started traveling since 2017, and I am still going to all the yoga classes, doing my yoga training, and trying to understand how the energy works. About prayer, I basically come from Muslim religion, so we already pray 5 times a day, but I wanted to understand why 5 times, what is the link with energies, and I pray to God, but I wanted to understand into the quantum physics how the prayer can affect our life and how the energy works all around. So I'm trying to do my research on that.
Yeah, make a note of that. We'll talk about the science of prayer.
My name is Mimi. I come from the United States by way of Nigeria, Nigerian American. Satyatma brought me here today, both metaphorically and physically. I'm on a path of continuous self-study, self-inquiry, and so you help me expand that. Thank you. I practice Anapana and Vipassana meditation twice daily, an hour in the morning and an hour in the evening. And I chant mantras throughout the day. They just play in my head. It's the soundtrack of my life. So if I'm cleaning the studio, I chant the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. I love the Ganesh mantra, especially when I'm having challenges. I love the Amma mantra. I have it tattooed on my hand, so I'm constantly in prayer. I chant over my meals.
What benefit do you get by constantly being in prayer?
A constant connection with Source, a constant communication with the Divine.
What's the benefit of that?
My life feels elevated. I feel like there are no obstacles. It's like the Matrix. Bend the spoon, there's no spoon.
So by being constantly in touch with the Divine, your way is made easier.
I turn everything over. There are no obstacles. It's not for me to try to handle. It's for the Divine to handle. People will try to make it my obstacle, and they just let that go too. Not attached to it.
That sounds super powerful. Sir.
So I'm Bernie from Switzerland. Mimi brought me to this place here. And for me, like prayer, it's more like a journey at the moment to find out really what it is, how it goes. Early in my lifetime, it's more like I'm as a Christian. Started as a Christian, but I'm really critical about. And now I have to reground a bit and searching a bit.
My name's Trista. I come from the U.S. and Mimi also brought me here in yoga school. And I use prayer mostly just with gratitude. I find myself happy crying all the time, and that's, I think, when I'm praying the most. I'm like, thank you so much, thank you for these wonderful things. But that's my experience with prayer.
Nice. Thank you.
My name is Camille, and I am here from the U.S. And I grew up in a really strict Christian religion, so I prayed every day, all the time, and had a relationship with that idea of God. But I did read the Bible every day, which said that God is love, and that was my belief system. So I had that connection. When I left the religion, probably about 6 years ago, I had to find my way again, and what my belief of what I thought God was and who God is. I became agnostic, and I still said a prayer that if you are real, let me find you and let me follow you, and I trust your will, not my will. I still would say that. But I don't know, this was a couple of years ago, or about, maybe it was a year ago, I did my yoga teacher training. I started doing yoga every day. More on the asana, but it was a spiritual-based school. And I just feel really connected to Source. Do I pray by the definition of prayer that you just described? I feel really connected, so I don't know how to say yes or no. It's not a structured prayer, but I feel super, super connected and one with Source.
Okay. Do you think, I'm not saying structure, but how about direct, intentional, conscious prayer could add to that connection?
I believe that. I mean, since I've been in Bali, I've been more specific in asking for guidance as far as tuning in and checking in what my soul's purpose here in the whole grand scheme of things is.
I think I pray also to give gratitude for all the things I have in my life, and also to ask for guidance when I'm lost. It can also be to go to church and light a candle for my my grandparents, for instance, and think of them. So, but I'm not Christian or any faith.
I'm Carrie.
Yeah, you can go.
I'm Carrie. I also came with I own a meditation studio in Canada where we do mostly sound baths and Reiki circles. So I do like to begin with prayer to higher power and angels. This one time I had a sound bath where it was an out-of-body experience, and I was in the Elohim. And the reason why I didn't even know what Elohim was, but before I went in, I got a message to meet my spirit guide. So I went into the sound bath, and I was taken out of my body. I could even see in the room. It was my first out-of-body experience. And you know those oracle cards where it's like person or like archangel, and there's like a little word underneath of their name. So I got a vision of that, and underneath it was all blurry, and I was like, ooh, it's my spirit guide. I was excited, but I was trying to make out what the name was, and first it was E. It was something out of like a movie where it was, each letter like revealed itself one by one, and it's Elohim. I'm like, I guess that's my spirit guide. And I found out later after Googling that Elohim is like where all the angels and God resides, so like the highest of the order. But as soon as I said that, I heard Jophiel, Seraphim, and Brea. Which I knew Jophiel's Archangel Jophiel, and Seraphim's like other angels and stuff. So yeah, I tried to pray to them now because I feel like they're my angels. But since I opened, I always kind of felt like there was a higher power kind of guiding. There's a bunch of stuff that was falling in place. But that's my beliefs, I guess. I don't know if that's the right thing. I think most people have different beliefs with it. But Elohim, definitely, there's higher power out there. So I do feel it around me a lot, and I try to pray and find if I'm really stuck in a hard situation, I'll pray, and usually within 3 days like something will come to kind of resolve the issue. So I think it's pretty powerful.
Nice. Praise the Archangel Jophiel. Yeah, so that's actually what will happen. If you talk to them enough, you'll be able to at some point hear them talking back. And that's something that when I channel a lot, they actually say, and it's a message they often want me to convey, is they'll say, give us a little of your time, right? Or give us more time, right? You're so full of these doubts, these fears, and you spend so much more time letting your mind recycle, you know what I mean, being in the whirlpool of your own doubts and fears. They say, how about this? How about you pause and talk to us when that starts to happen? Wouldn't that be better? Right? And so a lot of times I do something called a higher self meditation on Tuesdays, in which it's a journey to actually meet your own higher self, the higher part of your soul. And it's usually have some spiritual guides come. And they always say at the end, we're always here. And we're real. Yes.
I feel like really connected with my higher self. Is there a difference between higher self and God, like from your perspective?
So God is the highest self of all. The soul is an individual part of this one self. And what I'm calling the higher self in this regard is the soul, being pure consciousness, actually lives in multiple planes of existence. And so there are higher planes of existence where you actually are dwelling already. And so that's what I'm referring to as your higher self. But the highest self is God.
My name is Kim. I'm from Los Angeles. I'm here with me. Prayer, I gave up prayer for a long time growing up Christian, and to me prayer meant Christianity, and then when I gave up Christianity, I kind of stopped praying. So I had to rediscover it. I still don't think I pray a lot, but when I do pray, it's more to my ancestors. I have an ancestral altar in my house. So that's kind of what I think of when I think of praying, that I'm speaking to them.
Okay. Kim, I'm going to say something in this, and this may be controversial, especially, this is a big thing in what you might call indigenous religions. Sometimes they call it ancestor worship, right? In all spiritual systems, you should honor your ancestors because you come from them. But there is a phrase, you get what you pray to and you become what you meditate on. And so in terms of praying to your ancestors, the truth is some of our ancestors were rapists. Some of them were thieves. Most of them were not enlightened. So I'm not saying that you shouldn't try to connect with your ancestors, but, and I'm not saying you're like this. I'm really actually saying this in general, and I've seen this and probably for tape. Being sentimental about it is not going to change the science of things, right? You get what you pray to, you become what you meditate on. And the reason I'm saying this is because I've seen people engage in connecting with the beings on the other side. And if you're not connecting with the highest of beings, there's only so far they can take you, there's only so much they can help. And having said that, they will help, and your ancestral lineage will help. But just be aware, I wouldn't substitute prayer to the highest divine for prayer to the ancestors. Because the ancestors are probably still evolving themselves, wherever they may be. It's just a word of advice on that. But of course, I think we should, of course, honor our ancestors. But just, do so with full knowledge. Do you want to say anything else?
No, yeah.
Okay.
I'm working on the prayer. Yes, I still have that. This is so fascinating to me because I still have that kind of, I don't want to call it negative connotation, but I don't know, Christian association with the word prayer.
Yes.
So that's where I
Okay.
little stuff.
That negative connotation comes up with the word God too. Yes. It came up in my class. I was like,
I know, that's why I was like, I'm going to be controversial, right, when I said that. All right, this is why. How about this? Let's address these controversies right quick, because Keon does that. God. You know why I'm using the term God? Because I know people, you know what I mean, that get a little skizzy about it. Because everyone can agree that God is the supreme, right? No matter what your thoughts about it, the term God means there's nothing higher. Right? Everyone can agree on that, whatever religion you come from, whatever language you choose.
the argument was posed, what about the universe?
Right, okay, that's fine. But what I mean is, you could, yeah, but, okay. I'm talking about semantically. What I mean is, semantically means by simple definition in human language. Definition in human language, in every language, God is going to be considered the supreme, right? Meaning there's nothing higher. And so God is the universe. God is nature. God is your own self. God is the oneness of all things. God is pure energy. God is pure consciousness. All of that is true. And so you can use all of those phrases if you want, as long as you're talking about the highest. That's why I like to use the word, not just divine, the pure divine. Right? Because there's levels and layers to the divine. But what I'm doing when I use the term God is two things. One, I'm challenging. If you have a reaction to it, that's because you've been conditioned. So I'm challenging you to overcome your conditioning. I'm challenging you to overcome your trauma at being misled in a religion or even abused in one. First. And then I'm also reclaiming the supreme. If we cede the word God to those who are ignorant of its true nature or who misrepresent it, then we're going to have this divided effect of what is supreme or what is the supreme or etc., etc. So any term that means the supreme, I'm reclaiming it for the side of truth. Does that make sense? So that's why I'll use the term God. And then I'm going to say also, how about this? How many people here was born into the Christian religion? All right. Keep your hands up if you left the religion. So nearly everybody. So in terms of the whole challenge of things, guess what? If you're awakening and awakening, chances are you're going to leave religion. Let's be honest. Listen, I'll tell you another thing. If we're going to stir the pot of controversy, religion is doomed. As it stands on earth, religion is doomed because truth is rising. Those parts of religion that are true will be preserved, and the parts that are false will be thrown down. That's the plan for earth. Religion can't last, so don't be afraid to be ahead of the curve. And what's happening is you're usually going to be maybe attached to people who are still in the throes of religion, and then you have this guilt thing that they lay on you, and you feel guilty, you're thinking you're leaving them, and then there's conscience, you're still trying to relate to them, and they can't think outside the blocks. You need to think about the nature of your spirit. You need to think about your soul and what's most important. This is why I'm really destroying the idea of yoga means mind-body, union of mind and body. Because when you're always thinking about preserving the body and preserving the mind, a lot of times you'd actually do it to the detriment of the soul. The truth is, scriptures go into this. I'll tell you something. Vedic scriptures, the Vedas are the scriptures of India, and I'm calling them Vedic scriptures things that are descendants of that line. And especially the main ones, they cover it all. And they say you are an eternal spirit. Reincarnation is a fact. And I'll tell you what, it makes perfect sense. When I was leaving the Christian religion, actually not when I was leaving, but before I left, I was Catholic. I asked my Catholic priest, I said, why are some people born poor and why are some rich? Why sick, healthy? Why do some have good parents and some have parents that are horrible? If God loves us and He's just. He looked at me and said, son, I don't know. And I was like, good answer. I appreciate your honesty. But I need that. I need the answer to that question. That's important. You asking me to buy in, you know what I mean, to your version of God. And God going to have to make sense. Right? That doesn't make sense to me. And there was a couple other things that don't make sense. Eternal damnation. Right? The person who loves you the most is going to sentence you to torture forever. Do you know how long forever is? Right? Eternal. That's 1 billion years is nothing to eternity. You can't do enough sin in 70 or 80 years, no matter how bad you were. Hitler has not been condemned to eternal hell. You know how he is in hell, that's for sure. You know how long he's going to be in hell? Until the reactions of all the hellish evil that he's put out have returned to him, until he suffered for that. I later learned about the law of karma and the scriptures of India, which says hells exist for sure, and it's not just a state of mind. Your state of mind can get you there, but they exist. He says, and your actions will get you there. And you know how the universe works? On the principle of justice and mercy. But it's just that you suffer for the suffering you cause. It'd be unjust for you to suffer far beyond that. And so the universe operates in a system of action and reaction. Your actions have produced this type of result in the world. Those results return to you. Once you have experienced those results, then you're no longer bound by them. Then you get to move forward. That sounded like a way more just, sane, and loving position if there is a deity, right? And actually, thank God, that's actually how it is. And so, I learned this later. Ignorance is one of the pillars of the Christian religion. One of the pillars. They're about it. Right? They're like, they mean business with their ignorance. They're like, we don't want to know. Right? We don't want to study astrology. Right? We don't even want to know how our religion formed. right? Like what does it mean to don't worship idols, right? I have a picture, I have deities on my altar, right? It's Hindu. I posted it on Facebook, and one of my cousins was like, "You worshiping statues. You better return to your roots." I did not address that man. I love him. But I mean, right now, this train is moving. I was just like, man, if that's where you are right now, I got other things I need to be discussing. We got higher things that we need to be looking into. Like, I'm not doubling back right now.
In Deuteronomy, it talks about, not worshiping idols and not looking to astrology as the pagans do of the nations, and it's like against like Christianity. So what is your idea on how those scriptures were written? Do you think it's like a mistranslation into the present for control, or?
No, here's the thing. Actually, you know what? KRS-One. Anybody know who KRS-One is? All the black people. KRS-One is a rapper, and he's old, so he's like from maybe the 90s, 80s. Yeah. All right, so he's a old school rapper, but he also calls himself, like a teacher, and he is a teacher. And he said this. He said, "If you don't know the history of the author, you don't know what you're reading." So how about this? The Bible. Like what they were talking about during this time. Let's take the land of Canaan. Anybody know what Canaan is? What is it?
This is where Cain lived as well, right? No.
No, he didn't actually. You know what Canaan is?
Where the Canaanites lived, it was a land.
Yeah. It's actually modern day Palestine, right? In Israel, right? So in this land, just like in most places around the world, people were connecting with nature spirits and what you might call local deities, or there are beings who are running things behind the scenes, right? There's levels and layers of beings. It's called the astral plane. I'll get into a deeper metaphysical teaching today. And so there's beings on the other side there. And so what happens is, this is why, actually even in the Balinese culture, right? They have so many different little deities and village spirits and things that they're making offerings to so everything goes well. That's how things were, right? And then they'd have a little statue of that. In Hinduism, they have statues, and it's not that you're worshiping the statue. Anybody ever look at a picture and get the feeling for that person by looking at the picture, right? Anyone have a 3D image? How much more will you have a feeling? There's actually a science to it. In one of the paths of Bhakti Yoga, remember I said worship? It actually means archanam, which means worshiping in the deity form. This isn't an idol. An idol is something that you would put before God. They don't understand the science is that when you are focused, it is a focal point for the divine and for that particular being or spirit. So if you've ever actually been in a real Hindu temple and anybody ever done that and been in front of the deity form and felt the energy emanating from it, when you have focused prayer, so talk about the science of prayer. The science of prayer is the science of the mind. Mind is energy, right? The mind resides in the astral plane. Things are created there through the mind. The law of manifestation, right, is everything is mental and emotional before it's physical. This mental and emotional energy is formed on the mental plane and is brought down into the physical through action, right? And so that's how prayer works. You actually send out a vibration to a particular individual or an intention in the universe into the astral plane. If you're able to hold that intention, and here's there's so many things we can cover. Here's where the secret got it right? Your consciousness, your focused intention can create reality. What they left out is that the law of karma is also working. And so you have reactions stored into your what's called your subtle bodies that will allow certain things in and prevent other things from getting in. And so if you don't have the karma to get $1 million in a day, no matter how much you think about it, it ain't going down. But like say that it's a karmic possibility. Through focused intention, you can manifest it. Right? Does that make sense? So hold on. I know I'm tangenting, but I want to make sure I answer Camille's question. So what I'm talking about is getting beyond superstition to the science of things. So in the land of Canaan, they also would make little statues as focal points of the various deities that they were wanting to connect with. Right? Now what happened was a man named Abraham got inspired. And how about this? People don't know this. Yahweh was also a local god of the Hebrews. So there was Yahweh for the Hebrews. There was Baal for like the Canaanites. There was, and some of these spirits were not good. Baal is definitely an evil spirit, right? And so what happened was the Hebrews under Abraham was inspired by perhaps the divine to say, wait a minute. There is only declared the God they were worshiping to be this one God, which is actually true, right? And it goes even further back to Egypt. What happened was this is, and then a signal from the divine says, sometimes people will, if the religion is, for lack of a better word, primitive, they won't see the oneness, right? They'll know the oneness, but they won't go beyond the individuals to the oneness. Hinduism's not like that. It's all about the oneness, and all the individual pieces are meant to get you to the oneness. But say the oneness is being ignored. The divine may inspire someone to be like, okay, let's focus on the oneness. Let's focus on the one. And that way you can say the Hebrews were inspired to do that, and then they began a clash with all the locals. And eventually, that religion, that viewpoint, came to dominate. And it's a long story of how that came to dominate. How we actually even got it really was through warfare. Rome, the Jews passed on to Christianity this concept. Christianity was eventually taken over by Rome. Rome spread to the Western world, and that's why we're reading it in the Bible today. But it was written at a time when, so the whole "you shall not place any other deities in front of Jehovah" is because there were so many other deities being worshipped. You shall not worship idols. They were like saying, this is not part of our practice because we're worshiping the one which is beyond that. So they were specifically directed at all of their local competitors who had different religious systems. Does that make sense? But this new religion couldn't understand the higher science of simply using these as focal points to connect with these individual spirits, and then there's focal points to connect with the supreme divine. And Hinduism actually has that all down. Shiva, Durga, Vishnu. Those are the forms of the supreme. All the other deities have come out of that supreme, and they are meant to connect you with that supreme, like Ganesh. Ganesh is actually not the supreme Godhead. That's why he's called the son of Shiva. He's come out of Shiva. And so it's good to know this science. And so let me get into prayer. I'm going to get the introductions going. The reason I threw out this term, Ishtadevata, I asked Abdel, who do you pray to? Once you get serious about this, a form of the divine will come to you, and it will continually come to you. For example, what was your name? Carrie. Carrie got contacted, perhaps, by Archangel Jophiel and others, or members of the Elohim, right? And now it's become a focal point for you to connect with the divine, right? Now those beings are also part of the divine just like you in a much higher and purified state. Angels, archangels, gods, goddesses of light are in fact natural intermediaries for beings living at our level of existence. That's actually, it's hard for us to actually reach the divine without the help of somebody who's a little bit closer to the divine in consciousness and energy. And so that's natural. And so an Ishtadevata is a form of the divine that speaks to your heart and with you have a connection. And it's easier to focus on that particular form of the divine to reach the full thing. There's a debate in the scriptures, Krishna in Bhagavad Gita. The question is, so there's Brahman, which is God without any manifest qualities, pure spirit. And then there's Paramatma, which is God within your heart. And then there's Ishvara, the Lord, God with personal qualities. So the question is, what's the best way to worship? Is it best to worship the universe? Getting back to the whole God question. Did I answer your question, Camille? Here, let me finish this, then we'll double back to it.
But we can focus on whatever you need to focus on. I can ask you another time.
No, we'll come back to it. But let me finish with this. With the Ishtadeva, just so people know why I wrote it on the board. There's a question asked in Bhagavad Gita. Is it better to focus on the divine as a person with qualities? Or is it better to focus on the impersonal, just nature? And Krishna says, actually, if it's legit spirit, both of them will get you home. But for those who are embodied, it's far easier to focus on form, because that's how our minds are conditioned. So it's easier for us to focus on some form, somebody else who has a form, in order to reach that supreme, than it is usually to focus on just amorphous, nondescript spirit. So in Ishtadevata, if you have a form of the divine, also the form of the divine might not be the supreme divine, like Archangel Jophiel, being of pure light who has not, left the light. She can help you get to that higher state, right? But she's not the whole Godhead herself. As long as you don't lose sight of that fact, Archangel Jophiel is a good person to turn to if you have that personal connection with her. Is this all making sense? So in your prayer, and prayer can be just a discussion. That's what I mean. For me right now, I pray sometimes, but mostly I'm talking at this point. Like once you pray enough, they'll be like, here. In fact, I was praying this morning, and then what happened was Ganesh came through, and he's like, man, you're taking this way too seriously. Because he's like, I'm right here, bro. And I can channel. I can actually talk to him. And he was just like, okay. Do you know what I mean? But when I couldn't see him, I was praying. Like it's like calling. But then what happens is at some point, they answer. And then it becomes less, how would you say, mystifying. It's less of a mystery, like who am I praying to, what's happening, who are you praying to, and what's happening will become evidence. But what I'm encouraging you to do is you can keep praying to God, whatever form you want, the divine, whatever form you want. But as long as it's pure, if some form of the divine comes to you, resonates with your heart, let that be your Ishtadevata. It may be your Ishtadevata. It may be the chosen form of the divine for your soul. And if it helps you as a focal point, use it. Right? I connect with a whole bunch of different deities. I have a lot of Ishtadevatas at this point. But I know who's the pure divine, and who also is helping me get there. All right. So Camille, let's finish with your question, then we'll finish introductions. So did everyone understand that point about how, just to answer the first part of your question is, was it written? What I was saying was, historically it was actually written to counter the practices of their religious competitors. And then history is written by the victors. So now they've done this. But it's still archaic and primitive in its viewpoint, because they don't understand the science behind how an actual divine being will put its energy into a statue just so you can use it as a focal point. We're not worshiping wood and metal. We're using it as a focal point because we've crafted it into a form which helps us with the divine, and then the divine itself will rest in that form. They're missing that. And this is what it is. It's egotism. Ego means I, me, my. My way is the best way or the only way. It's religious egotism. That's why I said religion is doomed. Because the truth is, spirit remains and truth remains, and that comes from spirit and truth. And religions are man's organized versions of it, first of all. And second of all religions are contaminated because humans are contaminated. There's no pure religions. There's no pure expressions of truth. I mean, you get a pure verse or two. You might get a pure, even maybe almost a pure book. But for the most part, this is what Michael told me, the famous Archangel Michael. When I was first being trained in this metaphysics, he said anything touched by humans is impure for the most part. Now, of course, there could be little things, but if it's a large book, guaranteed, because nobody's pure. Like I would say there's a few things that remain, like especially, here's what you know is going to be pure, that which withstands the test of time and shows you to be practically useful. But finish, you had more. What's up?
Well, it was just saying in Deuteronomy, like it also said to like avoid astrology and all.
Oh, let's address that. This is another thing that happens with metaphysics in these religions. Right, exactly. Because those things were associated with their spiritual competitors, their religious competitors, and what happened was a lot of so-called black magic was using these types of things. So what they're doing is they're throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Anyone ever heard that phrase? That means basically if there's something negative there, let's get rid of it all. Right? And so that's what they're doing. So because this mystical knowledge is just knowledge of how things are actually operating. So astrology is just knowledge. You can use astrology for nefarious purposes. Right? It's like the Force. Right? So you can find out somebody's astrology, find out when their bad days are. In fact, in the Vedas, it's called Jyotish Veda. It's called a Vedanga. It's a branch off of the Vedas, astrology. It'll tell you your bad days, good days. It'll tell you days that are good for constructing a temple, starting a business, having fun, and also poisoning, going to war, planting crops. So you can look at somebody's astrology. You can find out when their worst month is, their worst day is, and when is a good day to give them poison. And so that's what happens, right? In these lower level religions, that's still happening, right? I mean, they might not even know the science to that degree, but with the voodoo or whatever and such, so those are going on. However, this is what I say to that. If the dark side is knowing the science of things, why would it be not good for the light side to know it? It puts the light at a disadvantage. Knowledge is knowledge. And so this is another reason why darkness is so powerful and dominant on earth. Because they're using the science of things, and religion has taught people not to use the science of things because it's dark. Whereas, of course, you can use astrology for light. You can also find out the best time to help somebody. You can find out when they're going through a hard time and be there for them. And I'm going to say this further, and this is getting a little bit tricky, but I know this. I know this because actually, so Gabriel is the deity of light in charge of trying to keep truth in religion, and it's been a fight back and forth. The world there's a war going on between forces of light and dark, and anybody can see that. Gabriel has been in charge of keeping truth in religions, and it's been a hard task. In any war, the first casualty is truth. And any good warrior or war general, they'll tell you, what the number one strategy is? Miscommunication. You send false messages, you interrupt their communications, you make sure that your enemies can't communicate effectively with each other, can't get good intelligence about what's really happening. You give them false information. And in that way, they defeat themselves. A lot of these things which are in these religious texts is false information meant to keep the public ignorant, divided, conquered, and afraid. And I'll say that's the dark side infiltrating the Bible. And what happens is, I'll even go further, most of us here have felt it in one way or another. Even if you didn't know the science behind it, like I just explained it, you felt it. You felt this is good and this is not. Right? And that's why you've left seeking a higher truth. I think the message would be, have faith in that and keep going. But that's why things are happening the way they're happening. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, that was helpful.
All right, cool. Let's finish our introductions and then we'll just read some things. See.
I'm here with media as well, and I'm from Portland, Oregon in the U.S. I'm really here just to learn more about prayer, because when I hear prayer, of course, I'm going to associate Christianity with it. And so I do have a question for you about what would you define as religion? Because you said religion cannot last, but what would be the definition of something that would be religion?
Well, I mean, I think it's just whatever, like, I think it's a common term. For example, there's a Christian religion, Muslim religion, Buddhist religions. I think that religions are things which have studied spiritual principles or come down, but then they become bound by a particular culture and then spread. And then the cultural aspects and the social aspects will often take dominance over the truths, the spiritual truths, which were also inculcated in them. So when I look at religions, what I'm seeing primarily is this spiritual truth in there mixed in with spiritual falsehoods, general falsehoods, cultural biases, and ignorance.
Would you say that would be part of yoga as well?
I think that yoga itself is not a religion, and Hinduism actually, originated its real form. How about this? We'll skip it. We'll go to the original term. Sanatana Dharma means the eternal way. I would say originally it's actually spiritual, but there's definitely Hindus that have come in and religionified it, meaning this is our way and we can't think outside that box. The main thing I would describe religion as is a spiritual box with anti-spiritual, unspiritual, and cultural biased elements in it. And so there is still spirit and there's still spiritual knowledge. So that's why I would say when people ask, because they'll see my altar, I practice yoga, I teach yoga, are you Hindu? I wouldn't say I'm a Hindu because that would infer that I might be a member of the Hindu religion, which I'm not. I'm a yogi and I'm striving to unite my soul with God through being able to absolutely control my mind. And I engage in practices which are handed down through the Hindu religion as well. But I'm not a member of any particular religion because if the practices are not conducive or the thoughts and the beliefs are not conducive to me uniting with God, I reject them.
I'm a little confused because you do say you are a yogi, which is identifying with some sort of basis or structure of...
No. A yogi is just what I said. It's I am striving to unite my soul with God.
Do you think there can be yogis using that term in other religions?
Of course. And I think the term yoga, in truth, it goes beyond Hinduism and everything else. Anybody who's striving to unite their soul with God through controlling the mind and doing it daily, and I would even go so far as to say a scientific way. I'm not saying in a religious way. The thing about religion, what I'm talking about, is really it's very culturally biased and very socially biased. It really is kind of, what I'm saying is, religions tend to be ego-based systems of spirituality, and they become boxes of thought that people can't get out of. So no, a yogi is anyone, even if you never heard the term yoga. If you're striving to unite your soul with God, let's not get caught up on semantics and think that a word is going to be bound to something else when it doesn't necessarily have to be. Let's get beyond the idea that a yogi has to be somebody associated with Indian religion. A yogi is anybody who's striving to unite his or her soul with God through controlling his or her mind, and is doing so daily. And what I'm going to say in a scientific manner, meaning science is the study of things as they are, and part of the scientific process is the testing of theories. Does this work? Right? What I'm saying is all the things I've taught, Mimi's come to a few classes, it works. The reason I'm talking about prayer is because prayer works. And there's a science to prayer, and we talked about that just a little bit now. So I think a yogi really has to be scientific. I'm not saying you have to fully understand the science, but you should at least test if it's working or not. Is it getting you to your goal? And you should be open to being wrong. You should be open to, oh, I thought it was getting me closer to God, and it's actually not. And that's when you know that you're a scientist, when you're ready to be proved wrong and for the sake of truth. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Thank you for the question. Amy.
Hi, I'm Amy. I'm from Canada. And I'm just here to learn and be inspired and have a few answers. I grew up Catholic, so praying to me was telling all my secrets to somebody in the sky and then asking forgiveness. That's also changed now in my adult life. And yeah, I don't pray so much now, but yeah, enlightened after today and give it a go. Thank you.
I'm Brittany. I'm from San Diego, United States, and I'm also here to listen and to learn. I'd say similar to some of us, I started off Christian, late teens, 20s, I walked away from that. Yoga came into my life more for movement, and then it turned more into prayerfulness, which I definitely have prayer coursing through every aspect of my life now. And all in all, it's kind of made, I almost want to use like this, like a metaphor of a training. I feel like I keep adding people who I pray to, or not people so much, but initially it's, you know, it's the earth and prayers and gratitude to her. And then it moved on to ancestors who were well and kind. And then there were the guides that added on to that as well. And just recently, been circling back to Christianity, realizing that it wasn't far off. It was, again, the box of religion. And speaking again to Jesus and God. And one that pops up often is Archangel Michael, but I call him Michelangelo, like the Ninja Turtle, because I think he's a lot cooler than that. And so it's just like becoming this prayer train of people that I address in different moments, depending on what I'm addressing or being grateful for. And then lately prayer is even just in the way that you move, you know, the way that you sing, and blessings over food. So I'd say that it's really made me feel, even if I'm solo, never alone. And that's prayer to me.
That's mature spirituality right there. The reason I'm saying it is because it's all real to you. And she's saying what I'm saying. Like, once you actually pray enough, you listen enough, you realize that these beings are real, they're on the other side, and you're interacting. What was your name again?
Brittany.
Brittany. So I think Brittany's advanced to the point of not just casting things out there, but actually interacting. Because another thing is when it is different people, that's a sure sign that you're interacting, because guess what? You're not just going to have a relationship with one person. And so I got goosebumps. Thank you, Brittany. I appreciate it.
I'm Julie. I'm from Miami, Fort Lauderdale, USA. So as far as prayer, I think, you know, what I do is just dedicate my life to just being the best I can be for everything. Other than that, if I ever like look out into the distance or whatever, like look out in awe or reverence, it's just, you know, to the goodness of the world, to the energy of the world. I was born into Catholicism. I rejected it very young because I thought it was kind of mean. Well, I thought it was very mean. It didn't work for me. So then I believed in my Creator, and then sooner or later that morphed to just the goodness of the world and the energy. And that's all I look out to.
You know what, I'll say this. There are really good things in every religion. Gabriel's worked really hard to make sure that's actually true. I know that for a fact. And you know what? There's this debate that used to go on: is religion better or worse for humanity? Right? And at some point, humanity was unevolved, so unevolved that human beings weren't going to think outside of boxes regardless. So being in a particular box and cultural system, it helped. And it can still help a particular type of mentality, right? But the more evolved you go, the more you're going to see outside of that box, is what I'm saying. But I'm not advocating that we leave the truth behind. Like, I'm not advocating in any way that we leave Jesus behind. Actually, we need Jesus. Actually, I'm say that outright, and I'm not saying that religiously. I'm talking about the person. And of course, Jesus is beyond the Christian religion. So I'm not trying to throw the baby out with the bathwater when I throw out religion. I'm saying let's appreciate religion for what it is. Let's acknowledge it, however, for the negative things that it's brought. And if we're evolved, let's leave it behind and trust in spirit. What it is when I see all this anxiety about leaving religion, it's because you've been called away to something higher, and that higher thing hasn't formed. Don't be afraid to be without a box to sit in. Does that make sense? Trust spirit. If she called you out, she's still going to guide you. And sometimes you may be alone physically while she's guiding you. I tell people this all the time. So if you feel spiritually lonely, focus on the divine. Sometimes the divine will isolate you from human companionship, physical companionship, because she wants to set in. She wants to settle into you, and she needs to remove you from all these influences, and she needs to purify you from your misconceptions. So trust spirit, even if she hasn't given you one box. Most people, if they say this is bad, they won't move to something else unless that other thing looks safe. So they'll stay in a horrible situation because they're afraid to brave it. I think the message from Spirit is, trust me, step out. So when it comes to religion, we're going to keep the good stuff and leave off the stuff that's not helpful.
Hi, my name is Maria. I'm from Austria. When you first brought up the mic, or asked if we pray, I thought, no, I don't pray. But since I started to think about it and during the conversation, I recognized I actually pray a lot. I use mantras or ask for guidance to the universe. For me, it's more like a way of communication. The definition was just to also, thank you very much for sharing your thought. Brought up a lot of things.
All right, so I'm saying prayer. I'm hearing a lot of you guys are seeing prayer through the prism of the religion you were born in, and therefore you have this reaction against it. The same thing with the God thing, right? Let's not throw out the actual thing. And it's just, did you say your name was again? Maria? No, Marietta. It's what Marietta said too, and it's also what Brittany was saying. Like, it becomes communication. You're just in communication with people, and they are people. A people is something with personality that's not an animal. That's what I'm going to call people, because animals have personality. They're people. They're divine people. They're higher, level people at this point, or at least they're living in a higher place. But yeah, it like literally, that's what I mean. I call it demystifying it. It's talking with friends, being in touch, staying in touch. That's what prayer is. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Sarah, and I'm from Germany. I am here because I want to get in touch with like-minded people in some way, because I haven't found that connection where I'm from, so I search for other places, and I had the same thoughts than you, because at the first point I thought I don't pray because for me, like all the definitions, like God and prayer, that were like really connected to a religion, and religion is not always good. It's not related to a good thing in my mind in some ways, but I think I pray in different ways, like finding gratitude in the moments, or just taking a step away when I feel afraid, just to step out of that feeling and connecting to greater things, so I can get into the pure feeling again.
My name is Pasha. I'm originally from Belarus. Spent half of my life in the US. The reason I'm here is because I went to your meditation on Tuesday, special, during the meditation. And I'm here in Bali to kind of just explore, take some time off. And I guess if I knew that this talk was about prayer, I probably wouldn't make an effort to come too much, just like the speakers before me noted. But not to repeat, I think the one thing, the reason I was born into like Russian Orthodox, and the thing I liked being that, because in Russian Orthodox churches, especially during the Soviet Union, like you didn't have a lot of things pushed at you. You just come to a really nice place that smells really good, and like my grandmother or my mother, they never taught me anything. They just said, well, you go and you put a candle for, the health of the family. So, and then I came to US, and there just this continuous debate whose religion is better. So I stepped away, and I think a lot of religions have a lot of good things, and my prayers are also just conversation with the universe. But I think one thing that I have that holds me back sometimes is that if everybody's talking to the universe, I feel like it's just a bit busy, and I don't want to bother God too much, so I come to it during the reasons of like really harsh times, when I'm kind of going, all right, I think it's my turn. But within the other times, I just try to feel the energy and kind of fit in. I think my closest thing is the nature, and then it's the universe. That's kind of how I pray.
I want to talk about going to God in hard times. You should. But how about this? Anybody got a friend who ever pops up when he needs something or she needs something? Right? When things are good, can't be seen. Right? What happens around the third time that person's popped up? Right? And what happens when you needed something? They weren't to be seen. They pop up like, man, can I borrow $30 out? Right? How do you feel about it? That's right, I'm putting you right on the spot. I'm kidding.
No. It's the point that I would probably say, with humans it's like that. But if we're talking something.
Yeah, so again, God's not going to be like that. What I'm just saying is, from an energy perspective, how about this? The idea that you're going to overwhelm the infinite is not going to happen, right? So I thought that was cute. But yeah, you praying to God is not going to bother it or make it more busy. It's actually for you, right? They're good, right? Ganesh, from where he is, he's doing better than we are, right? It connects you with the divine, and it also connects you with your own self. And to be honest and to be fair, every scripture, I'll still read from every scripture, right? Not the parts that don't make sense, like the Deuteronomy part. Leave it alone. The part that makes sense. All of them say this: pray unceasingly. So it's quite the opposite. Don't just come to God when you need something. Be with God all the time. I'll tell you the deities they said, we want some more of your time. Because you ask, and we can't. the more time you spend with us, the quicker you'll be able to assimilate our blessings when we give them to you. Everyone ever experienced that? The more time you spend with the divine, it's like a friend. You get to know them, right? Krishna actually says, out of all these practices, he says, the best spiritual practice, you know what he says is? Think of me always. So, yes.
What does it mean, think of me always? Like, it's like a conversation, like to have a person right next to you, or?
In every way possible, think of God all the time, without interruption. And that's how you unite with her. And I'll tell you this, you can't lose that way. You can't lose going into the infinite. When you lose something in the spiritual, genuine spiritual path, Rumi says this, it's making the way for something better. It's actually making the way for what you want. I'm a counselor, and I say this all the time. I'm like, you have to get these things out the way to get this blessing you keep asking for. And so don't be afraid to lose something in your devotion to the divine. It's making space for what you really want and need.
What do you mean by lose something?
I'll give you a big one. Family and friends. Parents. Right? The truth of the matter is you're an eternal spirit. Reincarnation is a fact. The reason I was saying this earlier, really quickly. You know why? Reincarnation made sense as to why people are born a certain way. Reincarnation and karma. Why is this person born rich, born poor? Because they did things before they took birth to merit that, and they're being born into the situations that they earned for themselves. It's a continuation of another thing, and you just can't see the cutoff, and you can't see the past. So there's no loss in devoting yourself to your true self. And if you lose your parents, you've had thousands of them. And if they are something that's really connected with your spirit, you won't lose them. And if they're not, how about this? I'll give you another one. Everyone ever heard of people having near-death experiences? What happens when they go to the light? They don't want to come back, right? Universally. And sometimes the angel's like, no, you're not done. They're like, bro, seriously? Right? However, having said that, before dying, they were like, Judy's going to miss me. What's going to happen to Sally? Who's going to take care of her? Right? Did they suddenly become assholes when they reach the light? Get this. Your mind changes. Do you realize that? Your last lifetime, or definitely 10 lifetimes ago, you weren't thinking about your parents. You're still the same consciousness. It shifted. It's not that, this is what I say with people in terms of letting go. You've heard this. What is truly yours will stay or return. You can't lose something that you're definitely meant to have. So, follow spirit and don't be afraid of what is lost on that path. It's making space for something better. And it may take a while. That's when you get tested with faith. Maybe Monday we should talk about faith. Ooh. I was thinking that. I think Monday we'll do faith if anybody's around 10:45. All right, last one, then we're going to... Actually, I'm going to say I'm going to do my little prayer piece, and then we'll go. How's that? Yes.
My name is Oscar. I'm originally from Germany, traveling since 4 years now on my journey. And I use prayer for improving my connection to the divine and to raise my vibration. And I experienced the power of prayer the first time when I was under attack of black magic. It was like what helped me in getting crazy.
Nice. Oh yeah, exactly. Well done. It can help a lot. Okay. So I'm going to end with this if that's okay. You know what? This is how I came up with the topic for prayer today. I was praying. And I do pray a lot, and I'm always trying to be in contact. But you know what? How about this? Well, I'll give you a story. Who's ever heard the story of Daniel in the lion's den? Or have you heard the phrase? Okay, so this is the story. Various times the Hebrews were made slaves, right? And so one occasion, a large percentage of the Hebrew population was taken off as slaves to Persia. Daniel was amongst that population of slaves in Persia. He was a prophet. The king of Persia was having these horrible dreams and nightmares. He didn't know what they meant. He didn't know what they meant. So he called his advisors. They were like, hey, there's a very talented prophet named Daniel amongst the Hebrews. We should call him in and have him interpret your dreams. And first, Daniel came in and started interpreting dreams, and there was all some good stuff and not so bad. But then Daniel started interpreting dreams. He was like, you know what, king, you're going to pay for what you've done. Actually, that's what these dreams mean. You know, you committed some great offenses, and you're going to pay for what you've done to the Hebrews and other things. King didn't like that. So the king started tormenting him and torturing him, right? And started really, making plans to perhaps kill Daniel. And one of those things was actually what happened was they threw Daniel in a den of lions. They had a den of lions underneath the castle, whatever. They threw Daniel in it. They were like, he's going to be ripped to shreds. And they went down the next day, and Daniel was peacefully chilling with the lions. And they were like, whoa. So that's the story of Daniel in the lion's den. But I think before that happened, maybe after, what happened was Daniel prayed for relief. He prayed intensely for relief. And for 3 weeks, no help came. Nothing happened. And he was being tormented during that time. And actually, I heard this story from, you can look online, it's a great Christian preacher. I totally disagree with so many things. He once said that the ridiculous statement that if you're not a Christian, you have no access to grace. He was talking about grace, and he was like, this message is for Christians. I was like, and it shows you how very intelligent and even divinely inspired people can be inspired by darkness also. Because the devil is, I have another one about religion. But anyway, you can be inspired by darkness for this division. So he said some really very enlightened things, and that's super very unenlightened and untrue. But he did talk about the power of prayer. And I think he has something on there. It's called Tony Evans, Getting Through the Enemy's Line with Prayer. And he heard this story. It's actually in the Bible too. But what happened was, after 3 weeks, I think, finally, Gabriel arrives. And he says to him, Daniel, the very moment you uttered your prayer, I was dispatched to come and to give you relief. But I was resisted by the prince of Persia. By that he meant the demon who was over Persia, who's helping the Persian Empire. And he said, I was resisted so fiercely that I had to call on the chief of princes, Michael, for aid to get through this demon to help you. He said, finally, Michael came to help. With Michael's help, we were able to get past the demon, and now I'm here. And so the message was, somebody's listening, your prayers are heard, but the truth is, the Almighty is everything. It's both light and dark. This is something that I really got disappointed with the Christian religion too. Part of it, I was just like, man, I'm suffering here. You said God was going to come help me. He didn't. I had to find out that God is everything. And then beneath and out and coming out of this God are beings of light and beings of dark, and none of them are omnipotent. Even Michael, who's the highest ranking being in our universe, is not omnipotent in that form. He is a divine form of God, but manifests like that. And so Gabriel is not omnipotent. These beings of light are on our side, and that's the real science of things. And so we may have to have faith and be patient when we pray. Because the main thing is that there's so many factors going on. I remember I was praying to the deities like, why isn't this happening? Why isn't that happening? Why do you only meet people this? Or why do you have to wait? She said there's so many moving parts. Like, say you're supposed to meet somebody you don't know. That person might have a job, they can't get off until this time. You know, this person's mom got sick, right, and they can't do this, and you have to meet this person, and then that person needs to pick something up from that person. They're working things out. Meanwhile, you might be waiting. If you ever talk to soldiers, you know what they say? Most of war is actually training and waiting. Right? And sometimes it's like that on earth. So faith gives us the patience. And the more you pray, the quicker you'll get answers to your prayers. And you know it'll be real when the answers aren't even what you expected them to be. But I think that we shouldn't doubt that our prayers are heard no matter what happens. And I think that we should rely on this. And what was happening today is, and it's been happening the last few days. The reason I thought of that story is because I've been having an issue, and I couldn't get through it. And normally I get through things fairly quickly, right, compared to the average person, and I couldn't get through. And it just was happening over and over and over and over. And I was praying. So you know what I did? I intensified my prayer every day. And then I found, anybody ever have this? You can't even pray like you want to. Anybody ever find that? Like your mind gets cloudy, you get weak, you can't focus, right? Oscar mentioned black magic. Guess what? There's dark beings who don't want you praying. And they'll put pressure on you. Think about it, I hate to say it like this, war. There's lines of communication. Your enemy wants to interrupt your lines of communication. So do you know what I did? I doubled down on my efforts. In every spare moment, I made focused, intent prayer over and over and over again. And then finally I had a breakthrough. Because here's what it is. I knew enough to know that I didn't know. I was just like, I'm not getting it. And that's the secret. Like, the secret is to know when you don't have it. Most people fail at that, right? And they go running off. I knew I didn't have it. So I knew I had to wait until it came. And this is how I knew I knew I needed to get it from a higher source, because I needed something that I couldn't think of. And I needed something that was beyond me. I was applying all my techniques, and Sadhanos, I got a lot of them. They were all failing. And I was like, okay, I need something beyond me, and I'm going to pray. I remember my pastor in my church, he said, if you have a problem, get down on your knees and say, God, I'm not getting up until it's changed. Stay down there 8 hours. Force the divine's hand. And that's another secret. If you worship God, if you pray with that type of intensity, she'll come. Something will happen. Then finally I had my breakthrough just last night at 2 a.m. And I was like, whew. And this was after weeks of intense prayer with this. And so I'm encouraging you. This is my true story. And then I woke up and I said this. Remember I started the class with, this is, I think, one of the most underused and most effective of all yogic techniques, because there's a divine power. It's real. And it can do things that you can't. Martin Luther King talked about that. He said, I had to go to that thing that could make a way out of no way. Maybe that's what we'll do. We'll listen to you. So that's my story on prayer. Do not neglect this powerful technique. So I think I want to end it on Martin Luther King's story, and then we'll say goodbye. Is that okay? It's like a short YouTube clip, like 5 minutes, but let's hear you.
So I wanted to add about being patient for something to happen. I think sometimes we just try to focus. I want that thing to change, and we want it really bad, but actually sometimes I think about building myself up, or my understanding up like a house. And sometimes I crave for, putting a roof on my house. But for that part of the house, I haven't built the walls yet. So sometimes I think we crave for something that we're not ready to have in our lives. So for example, I haven't met a lot of spiritual persons before. So because I think I had to concentrate on other things first, because before that part of my spirituality could grow. So I think sometimes we have to be patient for some things to come and concentrate on the other things to grow, and with patience we will see the big plan after something happened, because sometimes we can't see what little thing we want to build in our house and if there is enough structure or not.
100% agree, and I think that's an amazing insight. Thank you. I think Tony Evans talks about this in Getting Through the Enemy's Line of Prayer, and he talks about the science of prayer even more. And this really hurt me when I heard it. That sometimes truth hurts, but it made sense. He said, you know when prayer is really effective? When you pray for what God has already decided to give you. And you can call it the universe. He said prayer, he says, Jesus said this. He said, your Father in heaven already knows what you need and what you're going to pray for. So he was like, don't pray for this or that. Pray in this way. Say, how can I serve? We've heard that the two best prayers are thank you and what would you have me do? Because he already knows. But however, having said that, the reason, how many people feel like, man, their prayers have been unanswered before, like hurtfully so, right? What he was saying was, God already knows everything and already has a plan. And so your prayer becomes effective when you align with God's plan. So he said, first find out what God's plan is for you to what God wants you to have, then pray for that. And your prayer will call it down into your life. Because just like a child and a parent, right? Like, you know, your child could ask you for something that's going to hurt them. And they can feel like they really need it, right? This is a common thing. But the parent's more experienced. And so she doesn't give it. Or she says, now's not the time. Let's do this first. And then, and the child can't understand that. That's why, like you said, we need faith. But this is what he said about the science of prayer. He said, find out God's plan and then pray for that. Because those prayers will be answered. And if your prayers aren't answered, consider it a blessing. And you just need to learn about it. And you will later. Cool. All right. Let's end with MLK. This is so good. You like this one, right, Sana? Do you remember?
I think so.
Oh, wait. Let me pause. Does everyone know who Martin Luther King is? Maybe I shouldn't assume that. Does anyone not know who Martin Luther King is? Okay. I thought he was... Okay, no. He might. He's American, first of all. And if you're younger, especially, and not American, you might not know. So, America is, and always has been, one of the most racist places in the world. And during the 1960s, there was something called the Civil Rights Movement, where black people were... actually, black people never got full rights until 1965. If you think about that, that's literally a little more than 50 years ago. That's not a long time. And so black people had to go through these big struggles. And Martin Luther King was the greatest leader of the civil rights movement. And so this is what he's talking about.
Then we started our struggle together. Things were going well for the first few days, but then about 10 or 15 days later, after the white people in Montgomery knew that we meant business, they started doing some nasty things. They started making nasty telephone calls and came to the point that some days more than 40 telephone calls would come in, threatening my life, the life of my family, the life of my children. I took it for a while in a strong manner. But I never will forget one night very late. It was around midnight. And you can have some strange experiences at midnight. I had been out meeting with the steering committee all that night. I came home. My wife was in the bed, and I immediately crawled into bed to get some rest, to get up early the next morning to try to keep things going. And immediately, the telephone started ringing, and I picked it up. On the other end was an ugly voice. That voice said to me in substance, "Nigger, we are tired of you and your mess now. And if you are out of this town in 3 days, we're going to blow your brains out and blow up your house." I've heard these things before, but for some reason that night it got to me. I turned over and I tried to go to sleep, but I couldn't sleep. Frustrated, bewildered. Then I got up and went back to the kitchen and I started warming some coffee, thinking that coffee would give me a little relief. And then I started thinking about many things. I pulled back on the theology and philosophy that I had just studied in the university. Trying to give philosophical and theological reasons for the existence and the reality of sin and evil, but the answer didn't quite come there. I sat there and thought about a beautiful little daughter who had just been born about a month earlier. We have 4 children now, but we only had one then. She was the darling of my life. I'd come in night after night and see that little gentle smile. And I sat at that table thinking about that little girl and thinking about the fact that she could be taken away from any minute. And I started thinking about a dedicated, devoted, and loyal wife who was over there asleep. She could be taken from me, or I could be taken from her. And I got to the point that I couldn't take it any longer. I was weak. Something said to me, "You can't call on Daddy now. He's up in Atlanta 175 miles away. You can't even call on Mama now. You got to call on that something and that person that your daddy used to tell you about. That power that can make a way out of no way." I discovered then that religion had to become real to me, and I had to know God for myself. And I bowed down over that cup of coffee. I never will forget it. Oh yes, I prayed a prayer, and I prayed out loud that night. I said, "Lord, I'm down here trying to do what's right. I think I'm right. I think the cause that we represent is right. But Lord, I must confess that I'm weak now. I'm faltering. I'm losing my courage." It seemed at that moment that I could hear an inner voice saying to me, "Martin Luther, stand up for righteousness. Stand up for justice. Stand up for truth. And lo, I will be with you even unto the end of the world." I tell you, I've seen the lightning flash. I've heard the thunder roll. I felt sin breakers dashing trying to conquer my soul, but I heard the voice of Jesus saying still to fight on. He promised never to leave me, never to leave me alone. No, never alone. No, never alone. Promised never to leave me, never to leave me alone. Sometimes I feel discouraged. I don't mind telling you this morning that sometimes I feel discouraged. I felt discouraged in Chicago. As I moved through Mississippi and Georgia and Alabama, I feel discouraged. Living every day under the threat of death, I feel discouraged sometimes. Living every day under extensive criticism, even from Negroes, I feel discouraged sometimes. Yes, sometimes I feel discouraged and feel my works in vain. But then the Holy Spirit revives my soul again. There is a balm in Gilead to make the wounded whole. There is a balm in Gilead to heal the sin-sick soul. God bless you.
Should we end with 3 ohms?